Bob on the mic, spitting truth from the heights. Queens unite under stadium lights. Bright nights, 7 train rides. Dreams born in the real hum. Brooklyn to Queens, yeah, we all about that outcome. This our time, this our cheer. Mets talk loud, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. From Flushing Meadows, echoes bounce off the bat. Rob calls, take the mic, snaps like a thunderclap. Home runs over bridges, no gaps in the story. Mets rise, reclaiming the glory. 7 the city, blue and orange army swarm. Summer vibe electric, love in every form. From Biggie's blocks to Flushing's heartbeat. Our anthem loud, no retreat. This our time, this our cheer. Mets talk loud, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. The apple pops in the outfield, city of dreams. Rob's voice over static, Mets on every stream. White lines mapped out the future, vividly. From shade to city, the journey's never gimmicky.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets Talk Live right here on the channel and on X. And it is definitely the off season when I don't do a lot of shows, and we still got no Mets playoffs, obviously, because they decided to shit the bed, but we still got playoff baseball going on. And don't worry, the off season streams are gonna ramp up when we get closer and closer, as tomorrow me and Chris are back and better than ever on Mets Hot Stove episode 1 of the offseason. So obviously we're going to talk about some of the topics we have here. Obviously we'll get into more topics later on, or more about what we're going to talk about, what the Mets need and all that fun stuff. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're a new watcher of the show and the channel. And just remember, guys, this stream for the Mets Hot Stove tomorrow is already up. So if you can't find it, look for it. If you don't have it, put the notification bell on so you know when that show is going to start. I know there's a lot of people that still don't know that their shows are going on, or you have to look for it. Just hit that notification button. It's right at the bottom on your right side. It's a bell. Click on it, and you'll get all the notifications when I post videos and when I'm about to go live. So the good news is the Mets can't lose games right now. That's always exciting, right? That always is helpful. We do know that the Dodgers are going to the World Series once again, as they just embarrassed what were they, the best team in baseball, the Milwaukee Brewers? Yeah. You see, that philosophy doesn't work, all right? They got exposed and embarrassed by a way better team that spent a whole lot of money. Listen, when you don't have a rotation, that's what happens. This is what happens. This is a prime example of why you need top starting pitchers. And I understand they got Mizorowski and they got Peralta, but the way they did it, like they made Mizorowski come in the second inning, like he wasn't starting the game, he was in the bullpen. They basically have Freddie Peralta. That's what they were using. It just doesn't make sense. I just don't understand it anymore. I just don't. Like, you see the Dodgers, what they did. They have a terrible bullpen that they hardly used. And why didn't they use those terrible bullpen arms? Because you seen Glass now, you seen Yamamoto, right? You seen Blake Snell, you seen Shohei Ohtani. And oh, by the way, you know that Roki Sasaki guy that barely pitched in the regular season? Well, you know what? He came back and they made him the closer. And this is the problem with, I always have problems with a guy like David Stearns, because he would never do that. Because if you were paying Tanner Scott the money that the Dodgers are paying him, they would have ran him out there to die for as long as possible. Roki Sasaki would have never been an option. The Mets would have put him in a rotation and just lay him out there to dry. That is basically what it is. And for everybody who says, "Oh, when spending all this money doesn't win championships," well, when you spend it in the way that the Dodgers do, and they did it perfectly, right? They didn't need Blake Snell, but they got Blake Snell. Imagine that. You're allowed to get more than what you already have. You can make your strength even stronger. There is nothing wrong with that. That is the problem that I've always had with David Stearns. He always thinks it's enough, and it never is. That's a problem. Like, you could build from your strength and make it better, because the Dodger bullpen hasn't gotten exposed this whole postseason. If they would have got exposed, they might have not made it to the World Series. But guess what? They got starters that they have no problem going deep into games. You know why? Because the majority of them done that before. And for all the people, and there was a lot of us, not me, but there was a few, there was many, by the way, that remember in September, the Mets were falling apart, but they were still kind of in the playoff spot. And everybody's like, "Oh, I'd rather face the Dodgers." No, you wouldn't. They are a team that don't care about the regular season. They know they were going to make the playoffs from game 1 of the regular season. They set themselves up for the postseason. They knew this is why when I tell people, you always get the better starter. You always get it. Don't get the half-ass starter. Don't get the other starter because he thinks he's having a better season than the guy who is always better. These guys show up. This is why when people say, "Oh, why would you want this guy who got hurt this year? You were going to pay him all this money." You know why? Because when they come back from injury, they're the same guy. They come back being one of the best pitchers. That is why. Right? Blake Snell. How many times is he injured this year? Yamamoto, same thing. Glasnow, same thing. Shohei Ohtani, same thing. These guys, when they come back, they're fucking awesome. They're great. The problem with everybody and problem with David Stearns is that he believes Sean Manaea was a trade acquisition type of situation coming back from injury. Sean Manaea is not that good. When you have a career 4 ERA, you're not that good. And then you consider him your ace. You have a Japanese pitcher that, of course, the Mets get the worst one out of the bunch, quits on your team, who's supposed to be a co-ace. That is not a recipe for success. But why you give Burns all that money in all those years, why you give Max Fried all those money in all those years, because yes, they might get hurt. But just because you pay less money in less years to a guy like Sean Manaea and a guy like Frankie Montas doesn't mean it ain't going to hurt you if they get hurt anyway. So the guys that you're counting on the most, if they get hurt, it doesn't matter what their contract is. It doesn't matter how many years, how much money. Because you know why? Because they're not pitching anyway. But here's what I know. Who would you rather have coming back mid-season? Corbin Burns or Sean Manaea? Blake Snell or Sean Manaea? Tyler Glasnow or Sean Manaea? That is why you always get the better player. These unfortunate fans that say, "I'm not going to give 7-8 years to a pitcher and $250 to $300 million, but they rather give it to a loser in Pete Alonso, who is a bad defender and is a stat patter." Everybody can't wait to give 7 years to him, which would be stupid, but people don't care about that. But you won't give it to a guys who have Cy Youngs, who have great numbers, who is a guy that can always be a stopper. Pete Alonso will not be a stopper for a losing streak. It always seems to be a pitcher. The Mets didn't have a stopper the whole season. Why they had multiple 7-game losing streaks? Why they had big losing streaks? That was the biggest problem. And yes, and everybody's like, "Oh, how are you going to replace those stats of Pete Alonso?" Well, you can. It's not that hard. You know why? Because getting rid of Pete Alonso, you can probably get a Bellinger and a Josh Naylor. guys who can hit 25 home runs apiece, which is 50 home runs combined, and guys who can hit 80 RBIs. Let's say 75 to 80 RBIs. That's 160 RBIs, almost 160 RBIs. So you already take one player of Pete Alonso in those numbers of 40 home runs, which he didn't hit again. 100 plus or 120 RBIs, great. So you just replace that with two players that now you extend your lineup with Juan Soto, with Brandon Nimmo, with Francisco Lindor. And depending on who's going to be in this lineup, let's say Francisco Alvarez is going to be in this lineup. Like people are so focused on polar bear this, polar bear that. Pete Alonso, look at his numbers. But we see it all the time. It's not just one offensive player is not going to make a difference. Haven't we watched the Yankees for all these years? I don't care how good Aaron Judge is. He's not good enough, which it's hard to be better than him. He even had a really good postseason, and they were out in the NLDS in 4 games. So it's not about a one offensive player, but that one ace could make a difference. As I said, throughout the season, or especially at the end of the year and right when the Mets missed the playoffs, when you don't have an ace, you don't have that stopper or somebody that can get on that mound in game 162 that you need to win. That was the problem. You don't have that confidence. At least with that, Judge comes up 3 or 4, maybe 5 times a game. That's it. When you got an ace, you got a guy that can dominate a lineup at any given time and can completely change the game. That's the difference. And if you go back to the trade deadline shows, I said I wanted Josh Naylor. People killed me for that. And I didn't even want him as the first baseman, even though I put him at first base and DH Alonso, because if anybody noticed, Pete Alonso was a complete butcher at third base in the month of September. He was terrible defensively in the month of September. If you want to give him 7 years, $180, $200 million, go right ahead. But I don't want to hear one Met fan complain, even though they won't, because Met fans are afraid to kill Pete Alonso and criticize him. And on this channel, I will have no problem doing that. Because there's a reason why he doesn't get a lot of MVP votes, if any at all. There's a reason why teams are not jumping over each other, trying to give him a long-term deal. They're not there's not teams that need a franchise player or a face of their franchise and thinking about Pete Alonso. It's just not happening. That's the issue, as my Cowboys destroy the Washington Commanders. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. I'm watching my Cowboys right now. And are the Giants choking at the moment, guys? I know they were up by 3. I don't know what happened there. I saw somebody said the Giants suck. But listen, guys, this is the issue that I continue to have before we get into the topics of the day, is the fact that we have to understand that the rotation, even if healthy, I don't think it was going to be good enough anyway. I said that from the beginning. Once they signed Sean Manaea, not everybody was a fan of the Montas deal, and I know me and Chris were okay with it because he was going to be a 5th starter or 4th or 5th starter, and he was the guy that was replacing Quintana to give you innings. That was the whole idea. So I didn't like the rotation even if it was healthy. I don't think Kodai Senga would have held up even if he was healthy. He hasn't done it his entire Mets career in the 3 years he's been here. 2023 was a fluke. Nobody ever seen him pitch before. The Mets were giving him 7 days off every time he pitched. And once they were completely out of it, they manipulated his time off from pitching. So whenever extra day they were able to give him, they gave him. And did seriously? The Broncos just took the lead on the Giants. Come on, guys. I'm sorry, Giant fans. I know you guys are Giant fans, but how did you blow a 10-point lead with like 5 minutes to go? Jackson Dart, that interception killed it. But again, I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, NFL, football Sunday, you know how it goes. But as long as my Cowboys don't blow a 22-point lead with 7.5 to go. But this is the problem that I continue to have when I tell people, why did I want Sandy Alcantara? You know why? Not only does he not face you a few more times the second half of the season, but he'll be on your team. And he got better in the second half. You know why? Because when you get further and further away from the Tommy John surgery, they seem to get better. They get more confident in their arm, not falling apart. They feel confident throwing the ball harder, spinning the ball more, throwing their sliders, throwing their curveballs, throwing their breaking balls, off-speed pitches more. And they feel confident in that arm that it's not going to fall apart. And what did Sandy Alcantara do? He not only beat us twice in the final month of the season, he wasn't on the New York Mets. And I can care less when anybody says, oh, well, nobody else went out and getting traded him. So why do we have to be like everybody else? Because now we're going to go into the offseason. We all know we don't have an ace. You can't trust Stromanaya. Can Stromanaya even be a number 3? I think Kodai Senga is going to get traded because I can't see Kodai Senga throwing another pitch for the New York Mets. How can an organization have Kodai Senga on the team when in the final 3 weeks of the season, the Mets needed any type of starting pitching help they could have got? And Kodai Senga couldn't even step on the mound? I don't care if you don't feel right on the mound. There was no injury. You just didn't feel right mechanically. Get out on the mound and be there for your teammates. Do it. Because Shomanaya clearly didn't feel right the whole time he came back. But you know what? He jumped on the mound in game 162. Why didn't he do what Kodai Senga did? Kodai Senga quit on this team. There is no way. And if come spring training and Kodai Senga's on this team, then I'm going to be very upset at David Stearns that I'm already upset with David Stearns. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. You can't have Kodai Senga on his team. He's got to be traded. It doesn't matter what you have to give up for. I don't care what you get back for him. I don't care if it just, maybe you can pay his money down a little bit or pay his contract and get a somewhat decent prospect. I don't know. But it doesn't matter because he shouldn't be on this team. It shouldn't be on this team. Right? I'd rather give Brandon Sproat the rotation spot over Kodai Senga. And who knows if Brandon Sproat is going to be here, depending on trade situations or anything like that. That's what I will get into. But the fact that we didn't have an ace all season and too many Met fans were okay with that. And then when it started to get worse and worse and the trade deadline passed, and now they were clamoring for the young kids that ultimately weren't enough. Nolan McLean was up here too late. I told you he should have been up here as soon as Kodai Senga went down, as soon as July came. I understand given June, the month when you had multiple injuries and it was like, all right, you just lost 2 of your rotation guys. All right, let's see if we can, get by in June. But in July, a month before the deadline, you should have brought McLean up. Who cares about service time? Who cares about draft pick? Bring him up so you see if he can be a difference in your rotation. So you got a month, at least 4 starts to see before you get to the deadline. You don't think bringing him up in the month of July, he might have not won 1 or 2 more games for us? Would have made a tremendous difference at the end of the season because the Reds embarrassed themselves in the postseason. If you listen to what everybody was talking about, and the Mets didn't have a rotation anyway, but it just felt like people were saying that the Mets would have gave Dodgers a run for their money. They probably would have won, but they would have probably made it a little bit more exciting than any other team that faced the Cubs. So it was just the bad roster construction, the unwillingness to bring up Nolan McLean earlier than he did. You can't bring him up in the middle of August and think that's okay. And then wait. So then you bring up Jonah Tong before Brandon Sproat. which was idiotic within itself. Jonathan got exposed for not being ready yet because he doesn't have a third pitch. And Brandon Sproat was fine, but nothing. You see the talent, but he's not all the way there yet. And if you would have brought up Nolan McLean in July, maybe if you would have made a decent move, I'm not even saying an ace move, but a solid move for maybe, I would say, an above average pitcher in your rotation, we couldn't have had a couple more wins. It's just stupid. And Dolo, I agree. Steve Cohen talked about being the East Coast Dodgers and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But you don't hire David Stearns if you want to be the East Coast Dodgers. You don't talk about being the Dodgers and making David Stearns give you a rotation of a couple of has-beens, a couple of quitters, and a couple of reclamation projects. You're not the Dodgers. You haven't been the Dodgers. You're not even close to the Dodgers. That's the problem. I will take every superstar on the Dodgers over Pete Alonso. I would. I would take Freddie Freeman. I would take Shohei Ohtani. I would take Mookie Betts. I would. All three of those guys I would take over Pete Alonso in a heartbeat. How fast can I drive Pete Alonso to LA? Teoscar Hernandez, who we know the Mets went after. The Mets offered him a 3-year deal, and he took a 2-year deal from the Dodgers. Okay. He wanted to be there. You can't do nothing about that. The Mets tried. They gave him the better offer. You can't do anything about that. They tried for Yamamoto. They gave him one of the best offers, but he wanted to be a Dodger. Nothing we could do. We all knew Shohei Ohtani wasn't coming to the East Coast. So there's nothing you could do there. Roki Sasaki was already basically cemented into the Dodgers. Mets couldn't really do much there. So in this offseason, with the New York Mets changing their coaching staff, which we all knew was coming, you got to give the scapegoat somewhere. Stearns, I know we talked about, in his closing press conference, that he took all the blame, and I'm glad he did that. I'm surprised he did that, but he did it, so I'll give him credit for that. But he's keeping around Mendoza because David Stearns needs one more scapegoat if things go bad in 2026. So for all the people to say, why are you keeping Carlos Mendoza around, is one reason, is because Carlos Mendoza is the last scapegoat for David Stearns before he gets on the hot seat. That's why. No other reason. There's no other reason. Just because Mendoza had a bad year and wasn't very good with his decision making this year, even though I don't think it was all his fault, but he has some blame. David Stearns has to keep Mendoza, because if you're going to get rid of all the coaches as scapegoats in column A, Mendoza's column B, and it trickles down. That is why Mendoza didn't get fired, because if Mendoza would have got fired with the rest of the coaches, David Stearns would have been target number 1 on the hot seat. He don't want to be that. Why should he be going into year 3 or year 2 or year 3, excuse me? So that's what he's doing. So Carlos Mendoza is going into a season as a lame duck. If I'm going to give him probably 50 games. If the Mets don't start off good, even though they started off really good this year in about 50 games, so Mendoza would have been safe. But I'm going to say 50 games. If the Mets are struggling in those 50 games, we know who is going to get the short end of the stick, and it's going to be Carlos Mendoza. Does he deserve it? Possibly. But that's what's going to happen. Well, Dolo, Cohen is no Steinbrenner, and I agree with that. But we all remember why the dynasty of the New York Yankees happened, right? Because Steinbrenner got suspended and Stick Michaels able to take full control when Steinbrenner couldn't make any baseball decisions. And that is when Mariano didn't get traded. That is where, Jeter was still around. And obviously Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, trade for Tino and Paul O'Neill. and all that, Scott Brocious and all that. So, Steinbrenner, if you really think about it, he really kind of made an impact probably in 2000, where, that was when he was really in control once again. Because the 90, 96, 98, 99, that was all Stick Michaels. That was because Steinbrenner was suspended and couldn't do anything, couldn't make decisions. 2000 was when he kind of got back to it, where he was really, his hand on it was right there. But, Steinbrenner didn't win anything after that until 2009. Right? Oh, the Giants. Oh, that's crazy. So that's the thing, right? They didn't win until 2009, but you know what? You give Steinbrenner credit, because when everything was going on, when 2009, they missed the playoffs in 2008. What do? They get Teixeira and Burns and all the Burnett and all those guys. I forgot who else they got, but they got like 3 or 4 guys. Sabathia, right? And they went out and won the next year. They didn't miss the playoffs, and then they went out and went crazy, getting 2 big rotation arms, a first baseman. I think they got Nick Swisher as well, and they revamped their whole entire team. And that was still with the core 4 guys that were getting older. That was like their last hurrah, and they won a championship. Not saying that the Mets will do that and it works, but you know what? It works for the Dodgers now, didn't it? So the point is that the Mets have a lot of work to do. When Stearns gives a lot of 1-year deals and trade for guys with 1-year deals, you got to basically complete empty bullpen. And Diaz is going to opt out. We all know it. So your bullpen has to get revamped every year, which I always think is stupid. I think you need to have some guys, like at least 2 or 3 guys, that you'll have a 2-year deal for 1 or 2 guys. Obviously, your closers should have a longer deal, but you should have 2 or 3 guys mainstays in that bullpen. You shouldn't be worrying every year to fill 5 or 6 spots in your bullpen every freaking year. It's stupid. It just makes you worry about more stuff in the offseason. We literally got to sign 5 or 6 guys, and that's including Diaz. That's just stupid. It's not good. It's not good management at all. Managing of this team. Because not only you got to worry, if you're going to worry about Pete Alonso, you got to worry about Diaz. You got to worry about 5 bullpen arms. You got to worry about starting pitching. Like, that's a lot. You shouldn't, with a $300 plus million payroll, you shouldn't be worrying about that many holes. And unfortunately, the Mets are, because David Stearns and his stupid not giving long-term deals to basically any pitchers is why you're in this situation. You got to revamp an entire bullpen, including your closer. You have Pete Alonso as a free agent. You got holes in your infield, because who's your second baseman? Nobody knows. Who's your third baseman? Nobody knows. You don't got a center fielder. You got all those issues, and also you need an ace of the staff. And that is why all the coaches got fired, bench coach, hitting coaches, pitching coach, all that stuff. And Mendoza's the lame duck, the only one left. And that is where Kai Correa and Jeff Albert come in, as Kai Correa was named the bench coach of the New York Mets. I know David Stearns really likes him. He does have a lot of good reviews, but you know what? Mickey Callaway had a really good reviews. I mean, Terry Francona vouched for him. You know what I'm saying? So that means shit to me. I don't care. Right? He's a guy that I don't know anything about. And maybe that's on me for not doing my research, but why am I doing my research for Kai Correa? Did anybody have him on the list of bench coaches? We were talking about Carlos Cabeltran, guys that you could see becoming managers of the New York Mets, not Kai Correa. Well, Brad, yeah, I understand the money spent before Stearns wasn't well spent, but you know what? This bullpen is on Stearns. This rotation now is on Stearns. He didn't have to sign Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes. He didn't have to sign. He basically signed a whole new rotation. So it's just silly. I just, I can't. This is year 3, right? This is his second. That was his second year coming into last year. I'm not, yeah, I understand Nimmo's still around. Alonso, he brought back Alonso. I know this was Cohen, but Juan Soto got here. That wasn't him. That was Cohen, but still, he brought in a lot of guys that didn't work. Offensively, pitching, bullpen, and offense wasn't good. Brad, Holmes was a good signing, but what they did with their rotation made Holmes so much more important than he needed to be. Holmes needed to be a 4th to 5th starter where you can limit his innings, protect him, and let him get used to being a starter. He pitched well, but what the Mets needed from him was way too much because of the disaster that Stearns put together in this rotation. So, considering what Holmes was, which was a career reliever, turning into a pretty damn good starter, was fine. But you know what? What he did this year would have been a great number 3 or 4. He was basically a number 2 for us. We were treating him like a number 1. And you know what? In game 161, he had his best game, in my opinion, of his season, keeping us alive. And you know what? I have a lot of respect for that, for Clay Holmes, for doing that. And you know what? Clay Holmes should be a part of this rotation. Unless the Mets do something crazy and really revamp and do things with his rotation, I would still be on the side of putting Clay Holmes in the bullpen. Because at least I know that I could put him in the 8th inning, and I still believe the Mets are going to sign Edwin Diaz. I think, just like they did the first time, they're not going to let him opt out to the point where it's like, oh, he's got to talk to other teams. I don't think the Mets are stupid enough to do that. You can't lose Diaz and then tell me bringing somebody else in. It's a whole new complete bullpen. It's dangerous. But, put Clay Holmes as the 8th inning guy and bring back Diaz as your 9th. You got your bridge guy and your closer already. You already have Holmes signed. You sign back Diaz, you extend Diaz. Now you got your 8 and 9. Now you can work around what you need from your middle relievers, your 6, 7 guys, your 5th, 6th, 7 inning guys, like that. That is something that you can do. And then I still believe, I already said this, priority number 1, I already said this, is starting pitching. You need an ace. That is priority number 1. Priority, and it shouldn't be number 2. It should be 1A is Edwin Diaz. So ace pitcher, 1. 1A is Edwin Diaz. And if you want to put Diaz as number 2, but number 3 is Pete Alonso. If you're a Mets fan, if you can look in the mirror and not laugh at yourself and say Pete Alonso's priority number 1, you are the biggest fraud of a fan that I know or that I talk to or on this channel. And it might not be popular and it might piss you off, but it's a fact. You couldn't watch a 162 game season of this New York Mets and think that Pete Alonso is priority number 1. You are completely mistaken. Because starting pitching destroyed this team. Bullpen was a close second. Then you can talk about the lineup. Because, yeah, the lineup didn't start off well. Pete Alonso had a great month and a half. But when June came around, you had your stars at least once a month playing well. You had Juan Soto, you had Pete Alonso, you had Brandon Nimmo, you had Francisco Lindor. They came back at the end of the year. They were scoring runs. They just couldn't stop the other team scoring runs at all. Damn, how did the Giants lose? Ooh, that sucks. Oh, that's terrible. What a game, though, from the Giants and Broncos. Sorry, guys. But we'll see. Let's just see. And I truly believe, and we talked about this last year, and we'll really get into the topics in a few minutes. Pete Alonso shouldn't be as big as a distraction this offseason as he was last year. He shouldn't have been. I understand the distraction last year because of the Mets postseason run. So, he kind of like Pete Alonso kind of fell back in the lap of Met fans after his postseason and what he did against the Brewers in the postseason. But this year, he can't get in the way. This can't be a distraction. I already said this. Pete Alonso needs to talk to every team he wants to talk to. His final call should be the New York Mets. Whatever the offer is, if you want to come back, we'll match it. Unless they don't. Unless it's crazy and they don't do it. But it's fine. Tell Pete Alonso, go out and get your best offer. Come back to us. That is what the Mets should do. They shouldn't negotiate with Pete Alonso at all. Don't do it. You don't have time for that. I can assure you Pete Alonso is not more important than an ace in Edwin Diaz. He's just not. And I know people after this stream is going to comment on it and say you're crazy, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're nuts too, because you're not really understanding what was the main problem of this New York Mets team ever since June. It was the pitching, bullpen, and started. So with Kai Correa being the new bench coach, and we know Kai Correa, a lot of good reviews from him from around baseball, but I don't necessarily care what anybody says. Because again, Terry Francona vouched for Mickey Callaway, and how did that turn out? He was a creep, number one, and he was a bad manager. His in-game decisions sucked. Right? Some can say about Carlos Mendoza, right? A lot of good reviews from him. A baseball guy who's been a bench coach for a long time, been in the game forever, sat behind Aaron Boone in New York, had one really good season, one bad season. So it's kind of a 50-50 deal with Mendoza right now. So I don't know what Kai Correa is. He could be a disaster, and he could be the greatest manager ever. Who knows? Right? He never had a managerial job, so we have no idea how he's going to do. And then you're going to put him in the fire pit of New York. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, Paul, Alonso's important to the heart of the fans, not the franchise. If you care about the home run record for the Mets, go ahead. Because it seems like too many Mets fans care about that more than actually winning a World Series. So again, you could do that all you want. And you're the typical fan that would rather have Pete Alonso here and lose than have win and not have Pete Alonso. Like, I truly believe that with Mets fans. Truly believe that. And I think that was the thing with David Wright as well. Like, we would rather hold on for David Wright for dear life rather than win. When David Wright was basically a shell of himself because of injury, and Pete Alonso obviously is not injured, but, how many more years are we going to lose with Pete Alonso? What you're telling us is that you signed Pete Alonso to a long-term deal. You were stuck with this core for the foreseeable future. So that means in their last prime years, 2 or 3, maybe 3 prime years of Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, Lindor, you better win in those 3 years, because if you don't, these guys are older, and now we're in trouble. And that is where you can't just rely on that. You can't. Yeah, Murakami is not coming here. He talked about he wants to be on the West Coast or the Yankees. That was his quote. And then there's another guy, I forgot his name, another Japanese guy that the Mets are very high on, more than Murakami. So I forgot his name. I got, again, Mets Hot Stove tomorrow. We'll have all those names ready for you guys and talk about it with me and Chris. But overall, it's like the people that the Mets fans that talk about Pete Alonso don't want to win. They're the fans that act like they want to win and, never criticize Pete Alonso. But, if Pete Alonso's not on his team, they'll be more mad about that than the Mets winning or losing. And it's stupid. Like, this is the whole Tom Seaver stuff. All over again. The franchise. Where Pete Alonso can't even sniff Tom Seaver. Right? I know Tom Seaver, he won a championship. So it was close to the Mets' heart. He won a championship with them. So Pete Alonso's won nothing with us. He's had losing seasons for 3 years in a row since he came up. 19, 20, and 21. 22, he was part of a choke job in 2022. 2023 was a disaster. He was a part of that. 2024 was his worst season as a New York Met, and the Mets went to the NLCS. So what are we talking about here? The fact of the matter is, priority number 1 needs to be an ace. Priority number 2 needs to be Edwin Diaz. 1 and 1A. Pete Alonso needs to be third on that list. It's not exciting. It pisses off Met fans, but I don't care. You guys are delusional if you think that's not the right order. You guys are nuts. Pay attention to the 162 game season that you couldn't stop talking about because you're clearly not paying attention enough. The bigger problem was the starting pitching and our bullpen. That was it. It's just ridiculous when people talk about it and act like this team is missing just Pete Alonso. It's not even close. Not even close. You see what happens in the playoffs when you got quality starting pitching and at least one ace. So here's the situation with Tarik Skubal. Will Simon, Andy Martino brought it up first, and, people kind of are iffy about, Andy Martino, what he talks about sometimes, especially Met fans. But when he says something positive, listen to him. Because when he says something positive, it's true. When he talks negative and down to the Mets all the time, about the Mets all the time, in regards to trade players being traded, free agents, how many times has he said something about the Mets are not making this trade, they're not going to sign this guy, and they end up doing it. When he says something good about on the positive side and writes about it, listen. He talked about Tarik Skubal, and then the other day, Will Simon talked about it as well, that the Mets are linked as the favorites to land Tarik Skubal. And I know Met fans, and I think I know I posted it. Would you trade for Tarik Skubal? When I last checked, it was no, about 70%. I don't know what it is now. You guys can see it on your screen. I can't. But the fact is, people who don't want to trade for Tarik Skubal are the same fans that I don't believe really want to win. Now, I'm not telling you to trade Nolan McLean and others for Tarik Skubal. I don't see trading Nolan McLean to replace a good pitcher, which we don't know if McLean's going to be an ace. He's shown promise, but he shows signs of a really good pitcher, maybe an ace. You don't trade McLean and bring Skubal, even though Skubal at this moment is much better pitcher. Obviously, if you put Skubal as your ace, you feel good. But what you want to try to do is pair Skubal and McLean together. That's your goal if you're the New York Mets. I'm not worried about 2027. There might not even be a baseball season because of a lockout or a strike. Might not even be baseball. I'm not worried about 2027. Worry about 2026. Worry about 2026. You trade for him, and what we've heard that the Tigers and Skubal are about $250 million apart. Okay. So you kind of have an understanding of, if they're $250 million apart, you probably think that the Tigers are offering him around $100 to $150 million. So he's going to be in the 350 range for about 8 to 10 years, let's just say. So, yeah, that's a big number. Understandable. But you get him in on your team for at least 1 year. Now, if you got to trade Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams, Clifford, Morabito, Santucci, who cares, right? As long as you keep McLean in here, because there's nobody that I think should be untouchable for a guy like Tarik Skubal. If you got McLean and Skubal as your 1-2, now you can play around with your 3, 4, and 5. Now, Manaea could be a 3. Clay Holmes can be a 4. David Peterson can be your number 5. And if you're going to go crazy and go with your 6, you have options. You can have a Jonah Tong that might be available middle of the season. You might have a guy like, even if you keep Kodai Senga, you can keep him around, which I wouldn't, but do that. Maybe you can get, a journeyman type pitcher You know, a Jose Quintana type of pitcher to be your sixth starter if you want to go that six rotation route. Yeah, Brad, and you know what? It is a Dodger move, 100%. And that's why you do it. You do it because he'll help you in 2026. There is people who say, "Oh, well, why would you trade for him if he's going to be a free agent in 2020 after 2026? Why don't you just sign him?" You know why? Because every other team in their mother that has money is going to go after him. I don't want to fight for him when it comes to money. I don't want the Dodgers getting a hold of him. I don't want the Yankees or a team that might be desperate for a starting pitcher and think they're a starter away and spend a ton of money on him and we lose him. You know, what if the Washington Nationals, who, you know, got a new GM now and the owner is getting itchy? The Nationals are going to make moves. You got to be careful with them. You got to be careful. The Braves ain't going to sign them. We know that. The Phillies are kind of in a weird transition period. This is the best opportunity for the New York Mets to take control over the NL East. The Phillies are in turmoil. Once again, they got bumped out of the playoffs being one of the better teams in the National League. Again, they're getting older. They're losing a lot of free agents. You know, Suarez, who knows if Wheeler's going to come back the same. You know, Schwarber is a free agent. Harper's getting older. They're talking about trading Castellanos. That team's in turmoil right now. They're in flux. This is the best opportunity for the Mets to take advantage of a down NL East. You know, the Braves don't really have a lot of pitching. You know, we know their offense is dangerous. If everybody stays healthy, their offense is dangerous. They can be dangerous, but their pitching is a little bit in flux as well. This is the best opportunity for the Mets to take control of the NL East right now. That's their opportunity. That's why you make a trade for Tarik Skubal. You don't play these fucking games. You keep Nolan McLean and you give up what you need to give up because 9 times out of 10, these prospects don't turn into anything. And oh, by the way, you traded them to the Tigers, who just traded their star pitcher, who clearly need a lot of help. And pretty sure that guys like Sproat and Jet Williams and Ryan Clifford or Morabito or Santucci or guys like that, they might not be great major leaguers. One of them might turn out pretty well. But here's the thing. You traded them to the American League Central that you might see once a year. And the only time you might see them in an important game in the playoffs is the World Series. And that's a long shot. So who cares? Let them beat up on the AL Central and the American League. All this nonsense can be figured out. But, you know, you got Skubal. We know the Brewers are going to trade Freddie Peralta, who got an $8 million, I think it's a team option. They ain't paying that. There are already rumors that they're trading him. You know, Joe Ryan's an interesting one. We haven't really heard what the Twins are doing here, but we knew they were trying to trade. They traded a lot of people from their team last year. I don't think they want to keep Joe Ryan around. They know they're probably not going to win. You know, guys are getting older on that team, especially their center fielder. You know, Joe Ryan getting kept around. His biggest, I said value is right now. So they might capitalize on a value very high. I think Joe Ryan's going to cost them more than Tarik Skubal because Joe Ryan got a couple of years left of control. So, you know, Peralta is probably the lower end of these other two guys, but I'd be fine with Freddie Peralta. He's a damn good pitcher. Better pitcher than any Mets pitcher right now. And probably even better than Nolan McLean right now. No name, we don't know what they want for Skubal, but you know it's going to be a lot. And that's fine. But we can't be this prospect hugger organization. Because being a prospect hugger organization led to this 83-win disaster we had in 2025. And I also think it fucked the team in 2024 because they didn't want to make a move for, a starting pitcher in 2024 that they needed. They could have got another above average to really good pitcher in 2024 to go with Minaya and go with Luis Severino. They didn't do that. All these guys got broken down and tired at the end and gassed. Then when they got to the Dodgers, it was game over. So 2 years in a row, for all the Met fans who wants to be prospect huggers, you got what you wanted. So Met fans who are mad, I don't know why you're mad. You got it exactly how you wanted it. You wanted Vientos, Beatty, Acuna, Mauricio. You had them all on the roster. You wanted to see McLean. You wanted to see Tong. You wanted to see Sproat. You got all you wanted in 2025. So why are Met fans complaining? The same prospect huggers who were bitching about them losing are the same Met fans that complain about trading these prospects. You wanted them on the roster. You got them. Now you saw the result of those guys on the roster and what they provided to this team that had the second highest payroll in baseball, 83 wins. Congratulations. You missed the playoffs. You got what you wanted. You know how quiet Met fans are, the prospect huggers that always complain about trading every single prospect? Now they're quiet because they have no argument anymore. There is no more argument for these prospects. You got to start trading these guys. Why is it that the Dodgers continue to trade prospects? Doesn't matter if they're number 1 prospect, 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter. They know the proven player is better right now than any of their prospects. That is what should be concerning David Stearns. I'm not saying trade 12 guys for 2 starting pitchers. I'm telling you to get 1 ace of the staff. And it's not going to come free agency because David Stearns is deathly afraid of giving long-term deals to a guy over 30. And most of these guys are. Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, those guys are not getting signed by the New York Mets. I'd love them to sign one of them, but I don't think it's going to happen. A guy like Tarik Skubal, a little younger, I could see him trading for him and extending him. Freddie Peralta is kind of in that weird situation, but maybe. Joe Ryan isn't obvious because you can trade him. You have a couple of years of control. Makes sense. Those are the David Stearns type of deals that I can see him making. But you can't keep on being prospect huggers. You don't have no room for all these guys. That's what I keep on telling you. We didn't have room for the same guys that were currently on the roster for basically 100 games this year. Acuna, Beatty, Mauricio, and Vientos. All these guys play the same positions. 2 of them sat on the bench almost every game because you couldn't play them all. That was stupid roster construction. You let prospects not get at bats. These are guys you're trying to develop, especially Mauricio, especially Acuna. You're trying to develop these guys, yet they sat on the bench all the time. It didn't make sense. Not that I think they were any good at this point right now, but you weren't playing them, so they're not getting better with development. They're not earning any value to help you if you need to trade them. All you're doing is leaving them there, collecting dust. It was stupid. So when it comes to Skubal, when it comes to Peralta, when it comes to Ryan, none of those guys should be off the table. There is nobody that the 4 guys I mentioned in Mauricio, Acuna, Beatty, Vientos, all of those guys should be on the market. From your number 2 prospect all the way down the list should be available to obtain any of these guys. There is no reason why Skubal, Peralta, or Joe Ryan, one of them needs to be a New York Met. If you're not going to sign a Dylan Cease or a Framber Valdez, you better get one of these guys, or it is already a failed offseason. If you don't sign Valdez or Cease or trade for Skubal, Peralta, or Joe Ryan, it's a failed offseason. I don't care if they bring back Pete Alonso. I don't care if they bring back nonsense pitchers. I don't care if they bring back Edwin Diaz. It's not enough. You can't trade Nimmo. Not only do no team want him, he has a full no trade clause. Not happening. Not happening. You cannot leave the offseason and not have any of these 5 guys, either signing Valdez or signing Dylan Cease or trading for Skubal, Peralta, or Ryan. One of those guys needs to be a New York Met and needs to be the number 1 of this staff. Simple. That's it. It's very simple. It's a failed offseason. That's it. It will be. And if you don't think that is, because too many Met fans, if the Mets re-sign Pete Alonso, will only care about that and be, pull a bear. and we'll be going through the same nonsense again. Pete Alonso is not making a difference of changing this team. He's been on this team, and we continue to lose. He's part of it. Remember that, Met fans. We have to understand that. So, when it comes to Edwin Diaz, obviously he's much of a priority over Pete Alonso. We all understand that. Oh, some of us. But I'm telling you now, Edwin Diaz and Ace is 1 in 1A. Pete Alonso is on the back burner. If Pete Alonso happens to come with a contract from another team, then the Mets will figure out if they want to do better or match it. They shouldn't be negotiated. You tell Pete Alonso, go to other teams and see what you can get. It's very simple. Come back with the best offer, and we'll have a conversation. Pete Alonso is not priority number 1. He's not priority number 2. He's priority number 3. Because this is a situation where Diaz and an ace is more important than what Pete Alonso is going to bring to the table, because we lost because of pitching, not because we didn't win because of Pete Alonso, clearly. But let's remember, when you realize that a pitcher and Diaz is more important, a starting pitcher and Diaz is more important, you will understand right away how David Stearns is going about this offseason. If he's going after starting pitching right away and negotiating with Edwin Diaz, he's on the right track. But if he's bullshitting his way through other starters that are not mentioned on the screen, or the free agent starters in Cease and Valdez, and he's playing game with Diaz, this is going to be a very, very hard offseason for the New York Mets. It's the only way I can see it. And last topic. Is David Stearns going to make a big deal? You know what? I hope so. I don't trust him, as you all know. I'm not a fan of his. He gets way too much praise for a lot of losing. Because you know how everybody says, oh, well, David Stearns was kind of still the architect of the Milwaukee Brewers. How did that pan out? They didn't even win a game in the NLCS. They batted 118, the worst average ever in postseason history. Well, Dolo, if he signs only Pete and Diaz, then aren't we in the same position we have been, because it's the same fucking team? You ain't changing the lineup because Pete Alonso is back, right? So where are you changing the lineup? Diaz is your closer. Great. How are you going to get to him? We had one of the best closers in baseball this year, but we couldn't pitch him in save situations because the starting pitcher couldn't go deep and the bullpen couldn't give us leads. The starting pitcher couldn't hold leads, the bullpen couldn't hold leads, and Diaz was coming up in mop-up duties. So who cares? And yeah, Dolo, if it happens, David Stearns better be on the hot seat right away. Because if anybody believes that Pete Alonso and Diaz only are going to make the difference, you are the biggest idiot fans. And the owners and David Stearns love you type of Met fans because you fall for the bullshit and their stupid propaganda. That's my favorite word. I'm glad I thought about it. Propaganda. That is what David Stearns uses. He uses baseball propaganda to prop up the Met fans. Just like when I said, he was the only GM/president of baseball operations to go live for an interview 30 minutes after the trade deadline was over. No other GM did that in baseball. But David Stearns could not wait to get in front of the camera and tell Met fans, and could not wait to bring up the kids because he knew he fucked up at the trade deadline. Because he knew Met fans were talking about a starter. And when he didn't do anything to help your rotation, his last line of defense was the prospect pitchers. And you know what that did? That made Met fans get all giddy and get all hot and bothered that it shut them up. But you know what? The Met fans that were excited about that got exactly what they deserved. Because you got all your prospects you wanted up in Mauricio Acuna, Bae Vientos, and you got McLean and Tong and Sproat. And that brought you 83 wins and no playoffs. So congratulations, you damn prospect huggers that were stupid enough to believe David Stearns and his propaganda fell for the simplest trick in the book. his bullshit words. And I don't believe anything he says. I don't trust him. And until he makes a big deal that actually helps this team and makes a few signings to better this team, I don't trust him. Because the two big signings the New York Mets made last year in Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, we all know was finished by Steve Cohen, not David Stearns. So how can I trust a guy where an owner had to step above him to get a Juan Soto deal done and a Pete Alonso deal done, when he's signing Minaya and Cannon and Montas and Holmes, Minter, and then he makes trades for god-awful bullpen guys in Soto, in Helsley. Rogers was okay, but not great. So all his decisions and moves and signings and trades were a fucking disaster. How did Jesse Winker do? That was exciting. I'm glad he was on the bench looking cool, because it really didn't fucking help. So do I trust David Stearns to make a big deal? No. Does he need to? Yes. If you're not going to sign Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease to long-term deals, you better get Tarik Skubal or Freddie Peralta or Joe Ryan. One of these five need to be a New York Met. I'm not asking for two. I'm not going to go crazy, even though the Dodgers can do it, but the Mets can't. They should do it, but they won't. Go crazy. Trade for Skubal and sign a Dylan Cease. Now you got a 1-2-3 of McLean, Skubal, and Cease, where you're damn good. Now you can fuck around with your 4, 5, and 6. So will David Stearns make that big deal? Who knows? As you see on your screen, guys, the upcoming show is tomorrow, 6:15 p.m. Mets Hot Stove, episode 1 of the offseason. We're going to kick it off on a Monday while there might be a game 7 in Seattle. But we don't really care about that, right? We don't care. We're going to talk about everything we talked about. We're going to talk about these Japanese guys. We're going to talk about Alonso, Diaz, all these three guys, Peralta, Skubal, Ryan, Valdez, Cease, everything else we need to talk about with this team tomorrow at 6:15, Mets Hot Stove episode 1. Myself and Chris will be back and better than ever on Hot Stove episode 1. Obviously, throughout the offseason, we'll have other guests, as me and Chris are the main co-hosts. We'll have, a lot of content creators, Mets content creators. I'm going to try to get reporters on. We're going to do our best to get all the people on here that, know the inside details, looking into trying to get into the baseball winter meetings this year. That would be awesome if I can do that. Kind of 50-50 at this point, but that would be awesome. If I could do that, obviously it's right before Christmas. That would be awesome if I could do that. That would be a lot of fun. Me running around the hotel, trying to find all types of news and trying to get all these reporters on, trying to talk about that. But let's just see. But we start with episode 1 with breaking down what the Mets need, what we're going to talk about, and all that fun stuff. So tomorrow, 6:15 p.m., myself and Chris, Mets Hot Stove episode 1. Don't forget, guys, after the stream ends, it's going to take you to that Hot Stove stream. Hit that like button so we can get more likes for tomorrow so we can talk about our New York Mets once again. Thank you for tuning in to the Mets Talk Live stream right here on the channel and on X. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Let's go Mets, and enjoy the rest of your football night Sunday, guys. Have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets.
Rob on the mic, spitting truth from the heights. Queens unite under stadium lights. Bright nights, 7 train rides. Dreams born in the real hum. Brooklyn to Queens, yeah, we all about that outcome. This our time, this our cheer. Mets talk loud, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. From Flushing Meadows, echoes bounce off the bat. Rob calls, hit the mic, snaps like